Good morning. This is Jamie at Stonemaier Games, and welcome to my weekly live cast about Stonemaier Games news, uh, discussion of random topics, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions about pretty much anything if I have an answer for it. So feel free to ask away. I hope you are having a great Wednesday today on August 19th. I've been posting Tapestry expansion design diaries, and someone pointed out today that I've been one day off the whole time. Today's post was I posted it as if it were August 18th, but it's not. It's August 19th. Um, Fun little thing I got in the mail today. I'll show you this. I just got this from FedEx a few minutes ago. We're looking into. I've been talking a lot about more environmentally friendly options for our games recently, and one thing that Panda, our manufacturer, is looking into are biodegradable plastic bags. Uh, Plastic bags. I mean, it is possible just to not have plastic bags in a game. That is an option, but I think they are often pretty useful. Um, and so I haven't opened this up yet to see how good they are, how well they work, but I'm very curious about this idea because one of the things that came up in the discussion of plastic versus wood and things like that is that plastic is essentially forever. It doesn't biodegrade. So if you make something plastic, even if you keep it in your game for 100 years, at some point it's probably going to get thrown away. And so the biodegradable option is really intriguing to me in that it would act a little bit more like cardboard or wood in that eventually it would biodegrade back into the environment. These look like they're made from cornstarch, among other materials. Cornstarch was the one mentioned here. But yeah, I'm really intrigued by this. I'll give them a test to see if that's something that we can consider in the future. I'd love to hear your thoughts if you think that's worthwhile to pursue, even if, say, the bags aren't quite as good as normal plastic bags. Let's see, Carlos says that I've said that Tapestry Plans Employees is a more stuff expansion, but I think you totally underplayed how much there is in it. It looks amazing. I can't wait to play it myself. Thank you, Carlos. I appreciate that. Yeah, I guess I did underplay it a little bit, but it is, I mean, it's more Tapestry cards. There are some different Tapestry cards, but there's just more of them. There are more civilizations. And Carlos is obviously talking about Tapestry Plans Employees, which I've been talking about a lot recently. Um, Carlos says, Carlos is I'll answer your question first, Carlos. He says, I was wondering if Codename Cape is going smoothly and how far is the new viticulture expansion from being tracked in your monthly progress chart? Yeah, Carlos is referring to, I think I probably brought up that there's the possibility of a viticulture expansion, and I won't ever put something on the chart until I know that we are going to eventually make it. So I don't know that yet about a potential additional future viticulture expansion in addition to the three that already exist. And as for Codename Cape, I it's that's one that's like right on the border right now. I'm pretty sure we're still going to make it. I think we're still going to make it, that is we'll wait to see if that actually happens. But I have been talking a lot about Tapestry Plans Employees recently. Today I posted the rule books and the Watch It Played video. I posted a link to Rodney's Watch It Played video. Also, I just noticed before I went live on YouTube that there is a video from Jack at the Cardboard Herald. So if you're on YouTube and you want to see an interview with me talking about Plans Employees, Jack and I got together around a month ago and talked about it, and that interview just went live today. You'll also start to see content from other media today, tomorrow, over the next week, and then reviews. They can start to post reviews as early as next Wednesday. But I have at this point revealed everything that's in this box, so if you have any questions about it, I'm happy to answer them today. I also have another fun thing to share over here, but let's check in with questions real quick to see if I'm missing anything. Joshua says, why did you change the tiebreaker rule? I remember the building height rule was considered in the past. Yeah, this was a weird thing. Honestly, I think this resulted from a discussion. So in the original Tapestry, the original tiebreaker rule before we printed the game in the prototype stage was that the tiebreaker was the person who had the highest landmark, and I really liked it. It was kind of just a fun tiebreaker rule. Ties rarely happen in Tapestry, but when they do, I thought that would be a fun little thing. But I think this is one thing. Morton, our team Altama guy, who is very smart and is right 99% of the time. And he might still be right about this, but I recall him convincing me not to do that because it might incentivize players to value the taller landmark more than others in a way that players might forget to mention early in the game as they're teaching the game, or they might just forget that that's the tiebreaker rule. So I removed it, but I kind of regretted it because it's a fun little thing, and in a game where ties very rarely happen, I think it was worth adding back in. So I changed that in the expansion. Zach says, were there any additional items that I wanted to fit into the Tapestry expansion that didn't work out or that you decided might work in a future expansion? I don't think so. I think all the ideas that I was really excited about went in here. I mean, certainly there are no new tech cards in here. And it was really because I didn't have any ideas for new tech cards that I thought would do something different than the tech cards that are already in the game. So, um, yeah, I guess the one idea that I did have that didn't go in here, and really I would say that we're not even considering for the future. We played around with it, but we decided not to consider it. Is the idea of having an NPC uh, player on the board in all games, kind of like the Shadow Empire variant, but built into all games, where there's some entity, some existing civilization to conquer, to struggle against during the game, um, instead of just the other players. And we played around with it, and not even with this expansion. It was after this expansion that we played around with it, and it just didn't seem to work. So maybe we'll revisit that someday. But that was maybe the one thing that I thought about and decided not to pursue. Cody says he's wondering if the cornstarch bags will melt when exposed to water. And that is a great question. That's one of the things I'm going to test out with these, because one of the nice things about plastic bags is that if you do expose them to water, even just a few droplets, I want them to not melt away right away. So I'm hoping that these are eventually biodegradable, but not immediately or instantly biodegradable. Kevin says, have you ever put a board game on ice, and do you ever have a passion to go back to it due to a new idea? Oh yeah, Kevin, all the time. I have so many ideas that I maybe start to brainstorm. Maybe I do a prototype or two, and then I'm like, I'm just not excited about this. Or I discover that there's another game that already does the same thing. So I put games on ice all the time, and I do return to them sometimes to actually revisit them and see if there's something there, and oftentimes just to revisit what I liked and disliked about it, so I can learn from that and apply those lessons to future games that I design. I'll answer one more question, and then I'll jump around to one other fun thing that I have here. I have a lot of little fun topics today and things to show you. David says, how have you been balancing your time with designing your future games and advertising your upcoming games? Yeah, that's a great question, because a big part of my job is the marketing, the sharing, the I would say communications, but we have a director of communications now, so it's more about me marketing both our games and Stonemaier Games itself, in terms of the YouTube videos, the blogs, all the different things that I do. I mean, most of my time on any given day, I spend more time on the marketing, the operations, the logistics of the company than on game design. But there are some good days where, I mean, those days are good too. I really do love those things. But I love when I get an hour or two of game design in a day as well. So that balance has been going okay recently. I'll answer one more question, and then, or I don't know if I just said that. Sam says, have you ever come up with a game mechanism that I found so enjoyable that you tried to build an entire game around it? If so, what was that process like? I've certainly, and there have been several games that I've started to design where there was a mechanism that I was really excited about, and I started with that mechanism. Euphoria, the dice where the pips represented knowledge, kind of designed around that idea with Euphoria. So that was one, yeah, with Euphoria. The idea that I wanted these workers. I knew it was going to be a dystopian themed game from early on. I wanted the pips to represent knowledge, and originally the idea was as you move your workers around the board, they gain knowledge, so they learn more about the world. Kind of like in a much newer game, Teotihuacan, if I'm saying that correctly. Workers level up as you move them around the board. So it was very similar to that. However, I discovered throughout the design process that while dice are good at tracking numbers, dice are a lot more fun to roll. And so that's why Euphoria became a game where when you placed workers, you just placed it as the current pip, and then there's a random element. When you pull workers off the board, you roll them to do a knowledge check. So you're not actually having to track information on the dice. It's just an element of there's an element of randomness. There's also a knowledge track on the board. So yeah, I know that's an example of when I've kind of designed around a mechanism and how it's evolved over time. The other thing I wanted to show you today, some of you are starting to receive the spiral-bound Scythe complete rulebook, and as I mentioned on our web store and website, there appeared to be enough demand for us to try a print run of a hardcover version. So we did. We made a hardcover version. This is the first copy of it, so it is not available yet. I don't even think production is complete yet or finished, but it looks and feels great. Hardcover, nice hardcover, and the pages also, like the spiral-bound version, are that fancy special texture paper that we use now. So there will be a hardcover version of the Scythe Complete Rulebook available later this year. And so I have the first copy here. It looks great. Joe asked, "What's the chocolate of the day or the week?" Thank you for asking about that, Joe. Last week I mentioned that I received some chocolate from the Board Games and Barbecue podcast in Australia, and I mentioned this fancy macadamia nut chocolate that we've been starting to eat at. It is really delicious. But I mentioned that they also sent a pink chocolate, and I thought we had finished it off, but actually we had a few bars left over, so I saved them to show you this week. This is a pink chocolate from Pink Cacao Beans. That has it is chocolate. It tastes a lot more similar to white chocolate than milk or dark chocolate, but I've really been enjoying that too and wanted to share that with you today. So I'll munch on that after I'm done being live here. Casey says, "Am I excited about soccer in St. Louis?" And yes, I definitely am. I love soccer, and St. Louis will have a professional team, not just a semi-professional team, but a high-level team fairly soon. I don't know when they start. Casey, do you know when they're going to start here in St. Louis? I have also, among sports, I've been playing even more disc golf. I played more disc golf on Saturday this past weekend, and then I played a little bit on Monday at two different courses here in St. Louis and had a good time doing that. Still figuring out a lot about my form. It's very different than Ultimate, so I'm learning as I go with a lot of bad throws and some good throws, but mostly bad along the way. Abe says, when you cancel a trap card, so in Tapestry Plans Employees, there's one card that lets you cancel a trap card, maybe even a few cards that do that. Is it like they didn't play it, or is it discarded? It's discarded. So it's you cancel it. They have played the cards. They've already played the cards, so that can't be canceled. But the effects of it are canceled. Ian says, Morton's solo campaign sounds awesome. Any plans for a multiplayer campaign? I think there's a possibility of it, but Morton designed that campaign specifically for solo play, and it has been playtested lightly at multiplayer, but there's a lot more work needs to be done on that to bring it to a multiplayer audience and remain balanced. So hopefully someday, but currently we don't have that in the works. Tim says, how is Pendulum shipping in the U.S. going? Yeah, the shipments have arrived, and the fulfillment center is working on them. They have a lot to ship out, but I think by the end, within 2 weeks, I think they'll have them all shipped out. So by the end of August, they're on track for right now, which is great because that's just in time for the Tapestry expansion to arrive and us to do that pre-order on September 2nd. Freight shipping has kind of been a little crazy right now. Everything's been running behind. Australia's been really slow. Canada's been slow. Europe's been slow. I mean, everywhere has been really slow with freight shipping, and in unpredictable ways. Where like one day I hear that okay, it's definitely arriving in port on this day, or it's leaving port on this day, and then the next day the date has been bumped back a week. So it's been a little crazy. I appreciate everyone's patience for dealing with that in this crazy COVID time and how it's impacting different economies and logistics and operations in ways that are a bit unprecedented. JB says, is there a place where we can see the rest of the new Tapestry cards? Yes, this is going to be a bit of a facetious answer, but when you open your copy of Tapestry Plans Employees, I love to have some surprises when you actually open the box, or some, not necessarily surprises, you know what's in the box now, but some element of discovery when you actually open the box, rather than knowing everything up front. I think that makes it a little bit more fun. Gary says, I noticed Pendulum is now sold out. When will you restock? There is the possibility when fulfillment is done and we're confident that everyone received copies of their game in good condition, pristine condition, that we will have a few extra copies remaining at various fulfillment centers. So at that point, we will possibly open up more orders. So that's the soonest answer that I can say. Cameron actually has a Kickstarter going right now. Cameron says, any new developments on this year's design day? Joe has mostly been managing that process, but as far as I know, we are still on for the delayed date, the November date, because we decided to push it back a little bit, reduce attendance by quite a bit to meet restrictions here in St. Louis City. And so far, that is the plan to continue with everyone wearing masks and being safe about it. But if it is not a safe time for us to do it, we will not have it this year. Yeah. Cody, let me hold your question for a second, jump over to any topics that I'm forgetting over here. I do have a number of different topics to cover today. Some fun businessy things that I did recently. Lion Rampant, a distributor in Canada, hosted a symposium essentially for publishers to connect with retailers through Lion Rampant, the distributor. and they did it virtually this year. They've done it in person in the past, but they did it virtually this year. And so I was able to attend and had a great time answering questions from a lot of retailers in Canada. And it was great. It was really well hosted by Michael at Lion Rampant and Rodney of Watch It Played. Rodney was the co-host. They did a great job. And the retailers asked some really fun, wonderful questions. I never know what to expect when going into one of those things because I don't know how people think about me at any given time or think about Stonemaier games. But it was a great experience to hang out with Lion Rampant distributors and or their retailers. I also did a virtual playtest yesterday of something that I can't mention yet, but it was done on Tabletopia or Tabletop Simulator, and really, really cool stuff from what I saw there. It's not something that's being designed by me; it's some other designers that are working on a Stonemaier product. Also, recent post on the Stonemaier Games blog, there was a great guest post on Monday from an editor at CNET who talked about his experience on Kickstarter and about advertising, about marketing, and a little bit about campaign boosting services. Really interesting guest post. Also, last week I talked about customer service and how trying to compare how some companies, when you call them up for customer service, that they put you on hold, and others give you the option of staying on hold or being called back when they're ready, hopefully within a few minutes. So they give you a callback estimate. And it was just an observation I had about what I thought was a great example of customer service, to offer that option of the callback rather than relying on the customer to just wait there on hold for a while. Some companies do those callbacks better than others, but Charter Spectrum here in St. Louis, the cable company that I use, they call back within a few minutes, which is great. I'll come back to other topics in a few minutes, but let's see. Cody's question is, I know you love two-player games, and it's a rule for all Stonemaier games to play well at 2 players, and then also play up to at least 5 players. I also seem to recall a dislike of managing an NPC player in the game. That is true. Can you speak to this in Tapestry with the Shadow Empire? Seems like it plays better at 2 players with the Shadow Empire. Yeah, that's something that Morton created. Morton created that, and it kind of based on a light version of Automa for players to use. It isn't something that I designed or haven't even played with. I've only played Tapestry 2 players without the Shadow Empire. It does look like a really cool variant, but I prefer not to play with NPCs like that. NPCs that you have to manage versus just like there are other types of NPCs that don't actually do anything. They don't move around. You don't have to manage the AI for them. So I haven't tried it. I don't know, but I'm glad people have had a good experience with it. Carol says, where were you, or where are you with the Wheel of Time series? Have you gotten to the ones that Sanderson wrote yet? No, I'm still pretty far off from those. I am currently in book 5. I'm like 10% of the way through book 5. And my plan currently, I mentioned this on my personal blog recently, my plan is to read a few book summaries. So book summaries of 7 and 8 and 10. And so I plan on reading books 5 and 6 and 9 and then 11 through 14. That's my current plan. So mix up some of the books with some of the summaries, just because I'm loving the series, but I don't quite know if I have the endurance to read through all the books in full in the time frame that I want. Because there are a lot of book series that have next books coming out over the next few months. Like in November in particular, there are a lot that are coming out. So I would love to be done with Wheel of Time by then. I don't know if that's possible though. It might just be a couple year long process for me to finish Wheel of Time. David says, would I consider making a second board to Tapestry like Hellas and Elysium for Terraforming Mars? That way you can have new tracks and a world to interact with. We have thought about a new track. A new board is tough because of table space. Tapestry takes up a lot of table space. And so to add a whole new board, especially a big square board or even a small square board, could take up just a lot of space. So it's something that we might consider for a new track someday, but probably not a whole new board. Kevin says, did shipping in the U.S. start yet for Pendulum? Yes, it did, but it's going to take a little while. There are a lot of champion orders. There are a lot of non-champion orders to get through. So if you're a champion orders will ship out first. Hopefully you'll get a notification, I think, in the next week as a champion, and then non-champion orders will ship out over the next few days after that. David says, do I know when Pendulum or the new Tapestry expansion will come out in other languages? I don't know. That's up to our localization partners to decide and announce. Josh says, have I seen the trailer for Iron Harvest? It's interesting to see a video game based on the same world as Scythe, but not linked to your IP. You said that perfectly well, Josh, and leaving me no additional things to explain, which I often have to do when people mention Iron Harvest. But yes, I have seen the trailer, and it is awesome. It's a really epic, awesome trailer. I love that it's kind of from the perspective of a child viewing the world as it gets bigger and bigger. All of a sudden, really, really cool trailer for Iron Harvest. Okay, let's see. James says he just got a new job, including teaching a class. Have you heard of people using your games in education? I have, yeah. Some of the games that I really recommend for that are Between Two Cities because it's very easy to teach, and Between Two Castles because both of those games deal a lot with communication. So if you're trying to get people to work together better as groups, or as teams, that can be a great way to help them communicate better. But a lot of our games also they deal with the economies and logistics, operations, history with Tapestry. So yeah, I have heard of our games being used in education in various ways. I think I've heard of My Little Scythe being used. Yeah, definitely, absolutely. Adrian's just popping in to say hi. Miles says thoughts on the new St. Louis MLS team name and logo. A lot of nice red. I haven't actually seen the final team name, so I'll have to check that out after this podcast. I'll make a note of that. What are some other things? So this past weekend, I got together with my Stonemaier Games team. We all wore masks and we tried to sit far away from each other, but we got together in the same space and played Tainted Grail for the first time. And had a good experience there. The video for that will come in a few weeks because I have a lot of videos lined up over the next few weeks. Other games that we played, we had there was a power outage in Chicago where Megan's brother and his fiance are based, and so they came down. We invited them down where we have power and air conditioning here in St. Louis, and so they came down and joined us for 4 or 5 days. It was a bit of time where they joined us, which was wonderful to have them here. And we played a lot of games while they were here. We played Isle of Cats, Seikatsu, Euphoria, Glenmore 2, The Mind, and Azul Summer Pavilion. So we got in a lot of games over the last weekend. I also received some new games. The designer of Otrio kindly sent me a very fancy copy of Otrio that I'm excited to play. It's an abstract game. And Calico. I know very little about Calico other than that it's about ginger cats, and I own ginger cats, or they own me. And so I'm excited to get Calico out as well, along with Wizard Kittens, which I have on my shelf, 2 Kickstarter additions to my collection. Yeah, I have one other topic that I'll come back to in a minute. Let's see. Austin says, what are my favorite disc golf discs? Right now, I only have a few. I have Innova discs, so I guess that my favorite, I can't even say my favorite brand. The only brand I've tried is Innova, and I like my Leopard driver, and I like my Shark mid-range. And what's my putter? I can't remember what my putter's name is. But yeah, I really like my Shark, actually. That's one of my favorites so far. Peter says, did they fix the expansion name typo on the hardcover? It said Wind Gambit instead of Invaders from Afar on the faction listing. We didn't catch that. No, the hardcover's been in production for a couple months now, so we didn't catch that in the rulebook, unfortunately. It's not on the cover. It's buried inside the book. I think it's on page 100 or something like that. It's unfortunate that we missed that, of course. David says, will the details of the new Tapestry civilizations be posted other than the Watch It Played video? Again, I like for people to discover some things when they open a box. So you'll discover the additional civilizations when you get your copy of Tapestry soon. And you might see it in some of the upcoming videos from various media outlets in the coming weeks. I'm sure you will fairly soon. Let's see. Anthony says, the solo campaign and Tapestry expansion sounds amazing. I know it's mostly developed by Morton and team, but I'm just curious how much design work or input do you have in the automa modes in your games? Almost next to nothing. My only impact is when Morton comes to me and says, hey, Jamie, can we add 500 more cards to automa? And I'll say, maybe not 500, but how about 400 or whatever the number is. So it's mainly from a publisher production side and not at all the design side. Chris says, I love Euphoria, but I find the dilemmas to be weak. Just a task to tick, but not really a crunchy, difficult decision as a dilemma should be. Any plans for another expansion that might fix this? Thanks. That's great feedback, Chris, but no, I don't think we have plans to do another expansion for Euphoria after Ignorance is Bliss, the existing expansion. Chad says, in a worker placement game, usually the best first moves is to get more workers. Do you try to make the initial actions more enticing to make the first decision more difficult for players? If so, how do you do it? So one thing, like I'll use viticulture as an example. Viticulture and Euphoria actually are two good examples of this. One, in viticulture, it is good to get more workers, but the board can also get really crowded. You might not have a good place for that additional worker, and that money might be better spent on something, and even the time, the worker placement early on in the game might be better spent on something that builds an engine in a different direction. In viticulture, that can also often mean building a structure so that you can plant a vine so that you can harvest that vine early. Because once you harvest a vine, those grapes start aging on their own. So if you pair the choice to get a new worker with something else that can help you in the long term, if you get it started early, I think that can really help. The other way that you can think about it is for Euphoria, getting more workers again isn't necessarily better. It's a direction that players can choose, but it actually increases the chance, if you roll all three workers, that one of them will run away, that something bad will happen. I don't love punishing aspects in games, and it is a little bit punishing in Euphoria, but it's a way for players to actually think, is getting a worker even the best choice for me right now? Is that a good thing? And so you can give players that choice as well. Brist says, I've been hesitant about playing Scythe with two players. Would you recommend it? I don't know if I can actually say I can recommend it because I'm the designer and the publisher of it, but I can say that we play tested Scythe extensively at two players, both locally and in blind playtesting. And there are multiple elements of the game that are designed specifically so players can have a positive two-player experience with it. So as a player, as a gamer, I highly recommend it, but I'm also very biased because I am the designer. But I can say just that we did spend a lot of time playtesting it at the two-player count so that it could be fun and enjoyable. We don't just throw that two-player count on the box because it can play two players. We put it on there because we believe it's a lot of fun at two players. Sam says the aliens seem like it would be really strong if you drew one of the new space tiles that give you points for track advancements. I'm guessing this wasn't a problem in playtesting. Well, that's a clever observation, Sam, but something that you got to notice with the aliens is that if you have a tile on the mat, a space tile, you must get rid of it during the next income turn. So you can't have a single tile on the mat from more than one era for you. So that was something that we playtested. One of the earlier versions of Aliens let you have a tile that just sat there on the mat the whole game, and now you are required to get rid of it. So yes, even though you might start with a tile that gives you a few points in the first round because you move up the corresponding track, you have to get rid of that tile. You can't continue to just move up that track and get points every turn for the rest of the game. I'll talk about my other topic very briefly here and then get over to questions for the rest of the live cast. That other topic was that, my Sunday sit-down video this past weekend was about cooperative games that are designed around the idea of preventing quarterbacking, or at least the design choices are specifically to prevent quarterbacking, and not just little choices like saying, hey, you can't talk about the cards in your hand, but making it so that if you do talk about the cards in your hand, the entire cooperative game just falls apart. An example of that being The Mind. The Mind made its way on this list. The Mind is a game where you're trying to play cards in a numerical order without communicating. And in The Mind, if you communicated the numbers in your hand, if you said, okay, I have numbers 23, 16, and 95, there would be no game there. So its game is designed around that idea. And there was a lot of great conversation in that video about cooperative games with no quarterbacking. My Sunday sit-down video this Sunday that I filmed earlier this week will be about dungeon crawl games, which is not a genre that I generally gravitate towards for reasons that you probably heard me talk about. But I did find 10 dungeon crawl games that I have actually played, and so I made a list of ranking those 10 games and discussing them in that video. So I'm looking forward to seeing the discussion on that video as well, because I think a lot of people have played a lot more dungeon crawl games than I have, and I look forward to hearing their recommendations in the comments. So let's jump over for the rest of the live cast to questions and conversation. I feel like I was missing something there. We'll find out. Tim says, we recently played my first Castle Panic with our 3-year-old daughter, and she loved it. I know you have My Little Scythe, but would you ever consider a game for families like younger children in the 3 to 6 age range? I would love to see a variant of viticulture with kid drinks, like grape juice. Someone has mentioned a grape juice version of viticulture, something for everyone. Tim, it's possible, and I'm glad that you've had a good experience with those two games. It is certainly not my design forte, and it doesn't necessarily go with our general company philosophy, like our game philosophy. We do look to bring joy to tabletops worldwide and all types of tabletops, but we do so generally through at least family games, games that can be a lot of fun for adults. Um, I think it's possible because I think there are games that are playable from 3 to 6 players that are for kids who are 3 to 6 years old that are also fun for adults. I love to play Animal Upon Animal with my nieces and nephews, but I wouldn't call Animal Upon Animal an event game, right? You're not going to sit down and say, okay, guys, a game night this week, we're going to play Animal Upon Animal for the next hour and a half. It's more of a little filler, a fun little thing that you do. So I don't know if that's really our core focus as a company, but it is something that I'll keep in mind because My Little Scythe has been fun to publish and fun to see people and families and kids and families and even adults play My Little Scythe. Let's see. Nee says that they played Tapestry for the first time last night and loved it. That's great to hear. David says, to my knowledge, no one has used the Belgariad world created by David Eddings in a board game. Are you familiar with the books, and would you be interested in this kind of IP? I'm not. I haven't ever heard of that IP. No, I've never heard of that. I'll look it up so I can check it out. I think it's very rare that I would pursue an IP for a game unless it's a world that I really, really loved and was willing to spend a lot of time and investment in. It's not cheap to get an IP, even one that isn't super well known. Miles says he's finally starting to read Mistborn, which is my first Brandon Sanderson book. That's what from Miles's words. Which series of his do I recommend the most? I think my favorite trilogy of his is still the original Mistborn book. So you're reading it right now. I do love pretty much all of Sanderson's books. I love his works, but that what I would say is my favorite trilogy at least. And someday the Stormlight Archive might be, once it's complete, I might look back and say this is my favorite fantasy series or one of my favorite fantasy series or his favorite series. But we'll see about that because I really love book 1 and 2. Book 3, I thought revealed some really interesting things in the Stormlight Archive, but I don't know if it added as much excitement as the first 2 books. So I'm curious to see where it goes from there. The 4th book is coming out later this year, so hopefully I'll enjoy that more than I enjoy the 3rd book. I thought the 3rd book was great. Writing was awesome, characters were awesome, all that stuff. But I don't know, just didn't stick with me as much as some of the moments in particular in the books 1 and 2 of Stormlight Archive. Curious if anyone else had that experience with book 3. If that's just me. Steven says, a philosophical question here, inspired by your answer about the Shadow Empire. I've heard many creators say, make the game you want to play, which I think is great advice. But I know you have also put things in your games because the fans wanted it, like Shadow Empire, Automa, Scythe Master, Rulebook, Metal Mechs. When do you make for you versus the fans? Yeah, this is a great question, Stephen, because you're right. It is a tricky balance. It's something I've learned along the way, and I'm still learning because there's a certain way that I like to play games, and like not with. It's nothing against the other ways that people play games. I'm not really a collector. When I'm on Kickstarter, I am rarely getting the Super Deluxe Kickstarter everything all in version. I'm getting the game because I just want to play the game. The Scythe rulebook, like that didn't make full sense to me when someone asked for it, but enough people asked for it, and I'm happy to make it. So I think like the core design of any given game, it's both for me, but it's also something that I want people to have fun with. I'm designing it so people can have fun with it and have joyous moments with it around the world. So I am thinking of other people when I design games, but I'm also designing it from my own experience, something that I think I will enjoy. And I think I just tried to learn to listen to people and listen to critical masses of people because there's always going to be a few people who are really passionate about something specifically, but we always have to make 1,000 units of something at a minimum if we're going to make it. So that's why I was hesitant at first about the hardcover version of the Scythe rulebook because the spiral bound version just seems so much more practical to me that you can fold over the pages in this rulebook, which you can't do in the hardcover version. But once I heard enough people say that they were interested in this, that justified our ability to make 1,000 unit print run of it. So yeah, it's a tricky balance, Stephen. I'm learning as I go. Danny says, approximately how many Aussie birds will be included in the Wingspan Oceania expansion? A lot. I won't say a number yet, but there are quite a few of them. There are a lot of interesting birds in Australia and in New Zealand and in surrounding islands. Antoine says, what's my favorite Tapestry civilization in the base game or the expansion? Oh, that's a tough question. I mean, there are 26 civilizations now in Tapestry, so it's tough to pick my favorite. Um, I don't know. Let's leaf through them live real quick. I'm not going to show you any all of them in case I spoil something, but let's see if there's one that really jumps out from the expansion in particular that I'm really excited about. I really do like the aliens. I love the space tiles. I love the idea of going to space. And so the aliens, here, I'll hold it up so you can pause and read it if you want. This is how the aliens work. I'm pretty excited about playing the aliens because I love the space tiles. I love the idea of getting to space really early in the game and seeing how that can influence you. And also then later in the game you can get to space again by moving up the exploration track. Originally, I played around with the idea of the aliens just starting at the end of that track, and maybe moving backwards or something, but those ideas didn't work out. What about you, Anton? Do you have a favorite Tapestry civilization so far? Just scrolling through looking for questions at this point. Carol says, how did I like Tainted Grail? We love the exploration and story, but aren't big on the diplomacy mechanism. That's interesting. Yeah, one of my favorite actually ideas in the game is the idea that when you encounter something, well, this is how I was hoping it would be. What I found in the first few days of playing Tainted Grail, you play in a series of days. We played at 3 hours, so we played over 3 or 4 days. Um, that there's a combat deck and a diplomacy deck, and I love the idea that both you have these two decks that you're catering, that you're crafting throughout the game. What I was hoping, and what I hope emerges later in the game, is that when you encounter someone, that makes sense to give you the option that you can choose to have this encounter via combat or diplomacy. I really want that choice. Whereas so far you could only do one or the other, which was fine. I love that there's still two different things to do, but I really wanted that choice. I did. There's a lot of, I think, clever things. I love how the health works, how health kind of limits how high your energy can go. The components are really beautiful. The story, actually, one of my favorite mechanisms is the writing and the use of dreams. In Tainted Grail, if you end your return on a location at night, you have a dream related specifically to that location that might give you a hint about gameplay. It might tell you some backstory about that specific location. And sometimes you might even have a nightmare there that might be revealing and tell you things that are different than the dream itself. And so it gives you a reason to end your return on a different location than other players and different than where you've ended your turn in the past, so that you can have a dream there and learn more information. I thought that was a really, really clever element of exploration in the game to give you an idea of more information about the world. Zach says, am I backing the Glenmore 2 expansion on Kickstarter? I am, yes. I don't even know if I needed more stuff for Glenmore 2. We've only made our way through 6 of the Chronicles so far, maybe even less than that. Maybe only 4 of the Chronicles. And I still love the base game of it, the base version of Glenmore 2. But Morton and Team Altama are involved in it, and my friend Niels is involved in it. So I wanted to support them. So yeah, I backed it to get a copy of the expansion. I highly recommend it. Definitely, that game will absolutely be on my top 10 list of the year for 2020. Cody says, how big is the biggest D6 that you would put in a game? The smallest. We actually had this debate recently for Rolling Realms, the printed version of Rolling Realms that we're working on, and pretty big. I think it's somewhere around like 35 or 40 millimeters, and that seemed like a pretty decent size to put in the game. Nicholas asked why we didn't reprint civilizations that had some small tweaks. And Nicholas, the reason is it is possible that those civilizations will need tweaks in the future. We hope not, but it's possible. We don't want to reprint them every time they need a little tweak. So it just makes a lot more sense, especially given that all the little tweaks in the game are set up, they happen during setup, and you only need to look at them once. It's not something that you need to look at throughout the game. So they're easily printed on the back page of the rulebook. This makes a lot more sense, I think. Financially, for people who want to buy this game, the cost would go up if we added reprints of the expansions, and the idea that they could change again in the future. Gary says, when's the pre-order date for the Tapestry expansion? And that, unless something huge changes, it will be September 2nd for the pre-order for the expansion, followed soon after by shipping in September. Bradley says, do I know of other competitive games that require players to work together every turn besides Between Two Castles and Cities? Yeah, there are quite a few games that have positive player interaction. Maybe Cody's good at finding links. I do have a video about games with positive player interaction. Another game that we have like that is Euphoria. In Euphoria, it's not every turn, but when you build markets, it is really beneficial to build them together with other players and to coordinate that with other players to say, okay, in fact, we just did this when we played Euphoria the other day. I looked around the table and I said, I'd love to build this, but are you and you able to build this with me? And we built it together. So that Euphoria definitely has some positive player interaction. I'm trying to think if any of our other games do. Tapestry has some, depending on the Tapestry cards. But I have a whole list that maybe Cody can share. Burst says, I am new to viticulture. What should I get? I would recommend just starting out with viticulture itself. And if you want to splurge a little bit, get the metal coins. They're really nice. A lot of people will tell you start with Tuscany right away. I highly disagree with that. The Tuscany expansion does expand the game in some really cool ways, especially the extended board. And you will hear people say that they only play with the extended board, which is great. But for learning viticulture and teaching to new players, I think the original board is absolutely better. So I would just recommend getting Viticulture Essential, and if you want, the metal coins, and then expanding to Tuscany from there. Nathan says, do I have a favorite Feld game? And yeah, Castles of Burgundy, I would say, is my favorite Feld game. Stefan Feld. Mario says, regarding plastic components, earlier, if you're joining us now, I'm talking about how with Panda we're exploring the option of biodegradable plastic bags because we are trying to look for ways to remove disposable plastic from our games. We're not as concerned about non-disposable plastic. If you're using it in your game, that's fine. But we are looking at the long term, 100 years from now, 50 years from now, that if a game ends up in a landfill somehow, even a game that you treasure now, will it be able to eventually biodegrade? Mario's question is, regarding plastic components, the one that bothers me the most is an insert that is not functional and I have to throw it away. They're a bit unnecessary waste. Preparing my first, yeah, I think that's a great point. I thought there might be a question about that, but yeah, I agree with that. If the insert serves no purpose at all, it is kind of a waste of plastic. And then you throw it away and then it becomes disposable plastic, which is much worse. Mario says, preparing for my first Tapestry game, any suggestions for two-player games? Do you prefer to play with or without the Shadow Empire? I would highly recommend, I think we even say this in the rules, do not play with the Shadow Empire the first time you play two-player. Just focus on learning the game itself, the core game, and make sure you play on the right side of the board. There's a board that's specifically for 1 to 3 players. You can try Shadow Empire. I haven't played with it because it's not part of the core multiplayer design, and I have a great time just playing two-player games of Tapestry without it. So it's up to you. You can try it at some point, but I wouldn't try it with the first game. Gerald says, on a scale of goldfish to whale, how tempted are you as a non-solo gamer to try Tapestry's Atlantis solo campaign? It does look awesome. I would say somewhat tempted. Yeah, a little tempted. Even though it's not a knock on Morton's design at all. I think it looks really cool. It's just that I generally don't play games solo. Rachel has a nice comment about Scythe 2-player count. Raphael says, is it your plan to publish your co-op game next year or you don't have a time frame yet? I would love to publish it next year, but it is such a big game and such a big world. I think it's unfortunately looking somewhat unlikely that I'll get there. But I'm trying. I'm trying really hard. It's going to be really hard to do that. Joe mentioned, let's see if Cody mentioned that Joe said that we actually did catch this typo. Oh, you're right. Joe did mention this to me. It is, yes, it is right. Okay, so here is the hardcover, and it is correct in here. There you go, screenshot that. It is correct in the hardcover that it says Invaders from Afar characters right here instead of Windgamut, which for some reason said in the other version. So it is correct here in the hardcover. Thank you, Cody, for saying that. I really appreciate that. Gerald says, lots of reviewers think that embargoes are great, as does Gerald. However, many vocal people seem to have bad connotations with it, probably due to the term trade embargo, and I think also due to some negative connotations in the video game industry and the movie industry. Do you think it's worth the illogical backlash? I do. Yeah, absolutely do. I don't love the term embargo used. I wish it, like the way I say it, is that the media can start to talk about the Tapestry expansion today, and they can start to post their opinions about it next week. I avoid the term embargo because I think it does have those negative connotations. The reason, for those of you who haven't heard about why we do this, is it puts the advanced copy reviewers in particular on a level playing field rather than the reviewer who maybe got the game a little faster than the others because of how shipping worked out, or how sometimes reviewers will rush to be the first to post a review about it. In fact, they're almost always incentivized by by us, by people who watch reviews to be the first to do that. And so giving them a specific date when I can say, okay, advanced copy reviewers, today is the first day when you can talk about it. That way, they have weeks and often months to play the game, to take their time with it, to not rush it, to maybe put it aside for a while and play it, or not play it right away. They have plenty of time. They're not rushed to be the first. Rather, they're rushed to give the best opinions that they can. Not the best opinions, but the most informed opinions that they can at the same time as other reviewers. So that's why we have dates that we ask advanced copy reviewers to respect and not post before those dates. Frank says, Frank agrees with me about Stormlight Book 3. So apparently it wasn't just me. There's one other person who felt it a little weird. Not weird, but just honestly, it was a little forgettable. I think there was, in fact, there was a big reveal at the end of Book 3, talking about Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight archive. There's a big reveal at the end that I think is really important, but I can't remember it now. I need to go back and like read a summary of it because that was like the one big takeaway from the book. The rest of the book I kind of found a little forgettable. Brist says, can we expect a legacy terraforming Mars in the future? That's from a different company. That's not a Stonemaier Games game. But that would be pretty cool to see a legacy terraforming Mars. But that's a different company. Yorkin said a similar thing about Stormlight Archive Book 3. Okay, let's see here. Oh, looks like Rodney showed. Yeah, Rodney did show. So if you do want everything in this box, if you want to know what's in here, Rodney shows it to you in his Watch It Play video. Forgot that he did that. Elaine says, will Canadian delays be an issue for the Tapestry expansion? I don't think so. I will have to check. I'll check on the status of the Canadian shipping. So far from what I've seen, I don't think any fulfillment center is receiving Tapestry Plans employees later than September 9th. So that's the current status of it. And I think that includes D6 in Canada. But I will check on that. Canadian Tapestry. David says, any possible timeline of the board game arena version of Tapestry? I have no idea. No, I'm hoping sometime this fall, but I really don't know. Ivan says, do I like Cosmic Encounter? Did it inspire you to make so many different nations in Tapestry? You know, I didn't really think I loved Cosmic Encounter in terms of asymmetry and player interaction. I can't say that it came to mind very often, or even at all, when I was designing Tapestry itself. But maybe I should have looked at some of the aliens there to inspire some civilizations in Tapestry, because there are a lot of asymmetric aliens and abilities in Cosmic Encounter. Sam says, have I noticed that your game designs have changed since playing more games with Megan? Selfishly, we love more Stonemaier games that play well with couples. Yeah, I mean, the odd thing there, Sam, is not really, because a lot of my playtesting for the entire length of Stonemaier games has been with my co-founder, Alan. So we playtest games two-player, mostly locally, and then I bring in other local friends to playtest, but a lot of the games have been playtested specifically two-player. And that's why I'm happy to stand by all of our games two-player, because of that intense local playtesting that happened for all games between Alan and I. So yeah, it's kind of been the same way for my co-founder, just as it is with Megan now, although I don't really play test with Megan very much. I don't want to put that responsibility on her. We just play games for fun at two-player published games. Thank you, Cody, for finding that link about positive player interactions. Let's see. Chad says, should we make a game themed around Cody and how fast he can find links? Yeah, we should do that. Cody is very good at finding links to my videos and blog posts while we're live like this, while I'm live like this. Carol's talking about Tainted Grail here. She says the diplomacy is a little fiddly. Yeah, I did find the actual mechanism of diplomacy to be a little fiddly. Um, yeah, I agree with that. Cody says, I imagine ink, cardboard, etc. to get thrown away with regard to expansion boxes. Has Stonemaier Games considered killing the sacred cow on selling expansions and just using drawstring bags rather than full art boxes? We have talked about it a little bit in the past. Um, we're probably at the point where we really should start considering that, especially. And the difficulty a little bit is that we have to make some, I think, in boxes for brick and mortar retailers, but I don't know how many. Um, for games sold online, I don't think the expansion boxes are all that important unless it doesn't fit into the original game. Um, so I think it depends on how much can fit in the original game and how we're selling them. Because you're right, for this tapestry case, well, for this one actually, you do kind of just need this box. It doesn't fit into the original tapestry box unless you remove the original insert. So I don't know if I would do it here, but there's certain games, or maybe like My Little Scythe, where we could have done it because it was designed to fit into the original insert. The expansion for that was. Briss says, "How often do I sit down to play games with fans during conventions?" There's a convention that I really love going to specifically for that purpose, and that is Geekway to the West here in St. Louis. It was postponed / canceled this year, but it is my favorite convention because all I do is go there and play games with complete strangers and people that I only see at Geekway or people that I know from talking to them online. That's what I do for 4 days. I just sit down and play random games with people. Often games that I've said, I'm hoping to play this game. If this is a game that you love and you have and you wouldn't mind teaching it to me and playing it with me, I'd love to play it with you. But yeah, I play games with dozens and dozens of random people at Geekway to the West, and I love it. Absolutely love it. Steven says that Shem Phillips of Raiders of the North Sea, Garphill Games, has commented that he has gotten much more into solo games over the years because it's a way he can do a lot of playtesting of his own designs. Do I think this might be helpful to you as a designer at some point? Kind of. There is a game that I'm working on right now that, because of COVID, I have been playtesting it largely against myself or largely solo. However, I've been playtesting it just to see how it works, not really against an opponent. So solo, like Automa, is against an intelligent opponent, and I'm just not a solo designer. So I'm not looking to design that intelligent opponent up front, especially when so many of the game's mechanisms are in flux. But I have been playing one specific game against myself so that I can learn if the game functions. I'm kind of waiting until it gets to a truly functional point, and then I'll bring it to other people in my company. Jan Williams says, I'm intrigued about your statement about not tending to play your game solo. Do I trust Morton enough to do a good job? Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I do trust Morton. As a publisher, you carry some responsibility for your product. Yeah, that's why I have Morton do it, because I trust Morton so much. Greg says, I'm working on my first game and I want to give the artist royalties. Is there a standard rate for that? There's not a standard rate for that. No, I would say that most artists do not get royalties for games. But if they've been a big part of like the world building and the process, then sure, that's something that's very generous of you to consider. We've done it for a few games, but not most. We have not. Usually we commission the work and we pay for it. So I would recommend, if you're looking to only do royalties, I would not recommend that. Make sure the artist does get paid for their work up front in a commission form. And if you want to also give them a bonus of an ongoing royalty, you're welcome to do that as well. And there's no standard rate for that. David says, would I consider having an artist do work for another completely new game, like Andrew Bosley for a new game? Yeah, I'd love to work with Andrew again. Andrew's wonderful to work with, and I love his art. He's the artist for Tapestry. I love the artists that I work with Wingspan. I'd love to work with them again. I have worked with Jackie Davis multiple times. She's working on a game for us right now. She's the artist of Euphoria. And Jakob from Scythe. Jakob's an artist, a world builder. I'd love to work with him again. Robert of Pendulum. Robert's awesome. I'd love to work with Robert again. So yeah, lots of our artists I think are wonderful people to work with again. I'd love to explore other worlds with them. Rachel says, looking forward to getting our hands on the Tapestry expansion soon. Any updates on the Wingspan released on Steam? Last update I got was a few weeks ago from Monster Couch, and it's kind of the same answer I've gotten for a while, where they need a little bit more time. So I'm hoping that they release it at the end of August or early September, but I don't really know. It's such a big project they've taken on, and I think sometimes that maybe they're trying a little bit to do too much when they should just release the game in some formats and get it out there. But I know that they are trying to do the best for Wingspan fans around the world. So I think their intentions are good, and I hope they get it out there for people to play and try in the near future. Susie recommended Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. Yeah, that's one of the one-off books. And I love Warbreaker too, Susie. I'm glad you mentioned that. I would love to see more in that world. It uses a color-based magic. If I'm remembering that correctly, I think that's the right one that you're talking about, and that I thought was really, really cool. I think it was a color-based magic. Correct me if I'm wrong about that, Susie. But it was kind of a standalone book that seemed like there was more to come, but then nothing else came out of it. Tatan says, are there new tech cards? And no, that's one of the card types that we don't have any more of in this expansion. I didn't have any ideas for more tech card types for the expansion. Sean says, when's the pre-order for the Tapestry expansion? September 2nd is the pre-order start date. Tatan says, what's the MSRP for the expansion? We'll reveal that on September 2nd, along with the pre-order price. Brian says, have I traveled anywhere or had plans to travel to a location that you would like to base a game or game world around? Bucket list for me is to visit Great Bear Rainforest in British Columbia. Oh, that's cool. I haven't heard of that. I have traveled to different places around the world. One that I would base a game on. I have a game based in Tuscany. Viticulture is based in Tuscany. I would love to go to Tuscany, but that's kind of in a reverse order. Go to a place that I've already designed a game around. All of our other games, are there any that are based on location? They're mostly based on fictional worlds. So I guess there are cities in between two cities that I'd love to visit. But no, I don't often think of real world places as I'm designing games. And none of the games that I have in the works are based in real world cities or places. But I do love to travel just to see new places and do new things. Mike says, with everyone social distancing for the foreseeable future, do you have any thoughts of planning or plans on designing a board game experience that would work remotely via video conferencing? And yeah, I did. Yeah, I actually designed a game called Rolling Realms around that concept. Rolling Realms is available for print and play on our website, and it will be available in print sometime next year. We're working on that now. But yeah, I love the idea of thinking about that as a designer. Can this game actually be played remotely if we need to be in this situation for a long time? David says, what has been my most ambitious project that I'm currently working on or worked on? Yeah, the most ambitious project, I think, like the biggest one is the cooperative open world game that I'm working on right now. Yeah, sorry, Stephen, I missed your question here. He says, the space styles in Tapestry are a lot of fun, but they're interesting in that they aren't used in every game. What are your thoughts as a publisher on including cool components that aren't going to show up in every game? I generally avoid that. A few tiles are pretty easy to add, but if I had like a series of giant miniatures that you don't use in every game of Tapestry, I don't know if that's one way of saying it. I don't know if that's respectful of consumers' wallets if you do that, because they're buying all this stuff that they hardly ever use, or only use it once every 5 games or something like that. So I think I'm okay with some components being used that way, as long as they don't add significantly to the cost of the game. Tatan says, with a grand total of all the civilizations, what is now your favorite? I don't know exactly. Someone mentioned that earlier, and I mentioned the alien civilization is one that I am very excited by, that I really enjoy. And the original civilization, I think for simplicity sometimes, especially when I'm teaching Tapestry, the leaders are really nice because they're a fairly simple civilization. I don't have to think a lot about it during the game, and I can focus on the experience and teaching it to other players. So I'll say the leaders from the original game. I also like the one. It's not the Chosen. The one that has to like guess what they're going to have by the end of the game. I enjoy that one. Nathan says, have I considered not including new score sheets for Wingspan expansions? We won't do that if we don't add a new scoring category. But so far, we haven't added new scoring categories in each of the expansions, I believe. Or maybe we just wanted nicer score sheets in the European expansion. But in the new expansion, we do add a new scoring category, so we needed to add a new score sheet. Briss says, any news hints for an upcoming game coming to Kickstarter? I do keep track of what other companies do on Kickstarter to a certain extent, but I think you're asking about Stonemaier Games. And Stonemaier Games hasn't done a Kickstarter since 2015. Our method of publishing now is that we just make a product that we really believe in, and when it has arrived or is close to arriving at fulfillment centers around the world, we open up pre-orders and ship immediately after that. So we don't use Kickstarter anymore. We just make stuff and that we believe in and sell it to you, and you have it a few weeks later. James says, as a software tester, I'm curious, what traits, experience, or otherwise do I look for in Stonemaier testers? The main things I look for are reliability and the ability to share examples and reasons instead of solutions. Every now and then I will ask for a proposed solution, but mostly from playtesters, I want to know what happened, how did it make you feel, why did it happen maybe? But I don't need to know a solution. The solution is for me to figure out based on patterns that I see throughout playtesting. And reliability as well. I want people who are responsive, and also who are good at writing down their feedback, because a lot of the information I get about playtest is written feedback. Okay, let's see. I'm almost at the end here of questions, and then I'll sign off for the day. Thank you so much for joining me today, and thanks for your time and your wonderful questions. Sean says the co-op game is more ambitious than Charterstone. Yeah, Charterstone was probably the most ambitious in terms of scope of game and how big and difficult it was to design. That Charterstone was that game, but I would say that the open world cooperative game is now filling that slot of most difficult, biggest game to design. Cody says, will Marius Petrescu be the graphic designer artist for the printed Rolling Realms? He made the cool looking mock-ups on Board Game Geek, and indeed he will. Yeah, he is currently working on Rolling Realms right now. All right, I think we're at the end of questions today. Thank you so much for joining me, and stay tuned for media reports about what's in Tapestry and how they think about it, how they feel about it next week. Take care. Bye.